Hi everyone, I'm Sharon. This is part 2 of chapter 2 of The Woman Warrior. Sorry, my computer got cut off and I'm filming on my phone now. I had met a rabbit who taught me about self-immolation and how to speed up transmigration. One does not have to become worms first, but can change directly into a human being. As in our own humaneness, we had just changed bowls of vegetable soup into people too. That made them laugh. You tell good stories, they said. Now go to sleep, and tomorrow we will begin your dragon lessons. One more thing I wanted to say. I saw you and how old you really are, but I was already asleep. It came out only a murmur. I want to tell them about that last moment of my journey, but it was only one moment out of the weeks that I had been gone, and its telling would keep till morning. Besides, the two people must already know. In the next years, when I suddenly came upon them, or when I had caught them out of the corner of my eyes, he appeared as a handsome young man, tall with long black hair, and she as a beautiful young woman who ran bare-legged through the trees. In the spring, she dressed like a bride. She wore juniper leaves in her hair and a black embroidered jacket. I learned to shoot accurately because my teachers held the targets. Often, when sighting along an arrow, there to the side I would glimpse the young man or young woman, but when I looked directly, he or she would be old again. By this time I had guessed from their manner that the old woman was the old man a sister or friend, rather than a wife. After I returned from my survival tests, the two old people trained me in dragon ways, which took another 8 years. Copying the tigers, their stalk and kill, and their anger, I had been a wild, bloodthirsty joy. Tigers are easy to find, but I needed adult wisdom to find dragons. You have to infer the whole dragon from the parts you can see and touch, the old people would say. Unlike tigers, dragons are so immense I would never see one in its entirety, but I could explore the mountains, which are the tops of its heads. These mountains are also like the tops of other dragons' heads, the old people would tell me. When climbing the slopes, I could understand that I was a bug riding on the dragon's forehead as it roams through space, its speed so different from my speed that I could feel the dragon solid and immobile. In quarries, I could see its strata, the dragon's veins and muscles, the minerals, its teeth and bones. I could touch the stones the old woman wore, its bone marrow. I had worked the soil, which is its flesh, and harvested the plants and climbed trees, which are its hairs. I could listen to its voice in the thunder and feel its breath breathing in the winds, see its breathing in the clouds. Its tongue is the lightning, and the red the lightning gives to the world is strong and lucky. In blood, poppies, roses, rubies, the red feathers of birds, the red cart, the cherry tree, the lion outside, the turtle's eyes, and the mallards. In the spring, when the dragon awakes, I watch its turnings in the rivers. The closest I came to seeing a dragon whole was when the old people cut away a small strip of bark on a pine that was over 3,000 years old. The resin underneath flows in the swirling shapes of dragons. If you should decide during your old age that you would like to live another 500 years, come here and drink 10 pounds of this sap, they told me, but don't do it now. You're too young to decide to live forever. The old people sent me out into thunderstorms to pick the red cloud herb, which grew only then, a product of dragon's fire and dragon's rain. I brought the leaves to the old man and old woman, and they ate it for immortality. I learned to make my mind large, as the universe is large, so that there is room for paradoxes. Pearls are bone marrow. Pearls come from oysters. The dragon lives in the sky, ocean, marshes, and mountains. The mountains are also its cranium. Its voice thunders and jingles like copper pans. It breathes fire and water, and sometimes the dragon is one, sometimes many. I worked every day. When it rained, I exercised in the downpour, grateful not to be pulling sweet potatoes. I moved like the trees in the wind. I was grateful not to be squishing in chicken mud, which I did not have nightmares about so frequently now. On New Year's mornings, the old man let me look in his water gourd to see my family. They were eating the biggest meal of the year, and I missed them very much. I had felt love pouring from their fingers, and the adults tucked red money in our pockets. The two old people did not give me money, but each year for 15 years, a bead. After I unwrapped the red paper and rolled the bead about between thumb and fingers, they took it back for safekeeping. We ate monk's food as usual. By looking into the water gourd, I was able to follow the men I would have to execute. Not knowing that I watched, fat men ate meat, fat men drank wine from the rice, fat men sat on naked little girls. I watched powerful men count their money and starving men count theirs. When bandits brought their share of raids home, I waited until they took off their masks so I would know the villagers who stole from their neighbors. I studied the general faces, their rank stalks quivering at the backs of their heads. I learned rebels' faces too, their foreheads tied with wild oaths. The old man pointed out strengths and weaknesses where never heroes met in classical battles, but warfare makes a scramble of the beautiful, slow old fights. I saw one young fighter salute his opponent, and 5 peasants hit him from behind with scythes and hammers. His opponent did not warn him. Cheaters, I yelled. How am I going to win against cheaters? Don't worry, the old man said. You'll never be trapped like the poor amateur. You can see behind you like a bat, hold peasants back with one hand and kill the warrior with another. Menstrual days did not interrupt my training. I was as strong as on any other day. You're an adult now, explained the old woman on the first one, which happened halfway through my stay on the mountain. You can have children. I had thought I had cut myself when jumping over my swords, one made of steel and the other carved out of a single block of jade. However, she added, we are asking you to put off children for a few more years. Then I can use the control you taught me and stop this bleeding? No, you don't stop shitting and pissing, she said. It's the same with the blood. Let it run. Let it walk, in Chinese. To console me for being without family on this day, they let me look inside the gourd. My whole family was visiting friends on the other side of the river. Everyone had good clothes and were exchanging cakes. It was a wedding. My mother was talking to the hosts. Thank you for taking our daughter. Wherever she is, she must be happy now. She will certainly come back if she is alive, and if she is a spirit, you have given her a descent line. We are so grateful. Yes, I would be happy. How full I would be with all her love for me. I would have for a new husband my own playmate, dear since childhood, who loved me so much he was become my spirit bridegroom for my sake. We will be so happy when I come back to the valley, healthy and strong, and not a ghost. The water gave me a close-up of my husband's wonderful face, and I was watching when it went white at the sudden approach of armored men on horseback, thudding and jangling. My people grabbed iron skillets, boiling soup, knives, hammers, scissors, whatever weapons came to hand, but my father said, there are too many of them. And they put down the weapons and waited quietly at the door, open as if for guests. An army of horsemen stopped at our house, the foot soldiers in the distance coming closer. A horseman with silver scales of fire in the sun shouted from the scroll in his hands, his words opening a red gap in his black beard. Your baron has pledged 50 men from this district, one from each family, he said, and then named the family names. No, I screamed to the gourd. I'll go, my new husband and my youngest brother said to their fathers. No, my father said, I myself will go. But the women held him back until the foot soldiers passed by, and my husband and my brother leaving with them. As if disturbed by the marching feet, the water churned, and when it stilled again, wait, I yelled, wait. They were strangers. The baron and his family, all of his family, were knocking their heads on the floor in the front of their ancestors and thanking the gods out loud for protecting them from conscription. I watched the baron's piggish face chew open mouth on the sacrificial pig. I plunged my hand into the gourd, making a grab for his thick throat, and he broke into pieces, splashing water all over my face and clothes. I turned the gourd upside down to empty it, but no little people came tumbling out. Why can't I go down there now and help them? I cried. I'll run away with the 2 boys and we'll hide in the caves. No, the old man said, you're not ready. You're only 14 years old. You'll get hurt for nothing. Wait until you are 22, the old woman said. You'll be big and then more skillful. No army will be able to stop you from doing whatever you want. If you go now, you'll be killed. You have wasted 7.5 years of our time. You will deprive your people of a champion. I'm good enough now to save the boys. We didn't work so hard just to save 2 boys, but whole families, of course. Do you really think I'll be able to do that, defeat an army? Even when you fight against soldiers trained as you are, most of them will be men, heavy-footed and rough. You will have the advantage. Don't be impatient. But I had ended to panic about them already. I could feel a wooden door inside of me close. I had learned on the farm that I could stop loving animals raised for slaughter. I could start loving them immediately when someone said, "This one is a pet," freeing me and opening the door. We had lost males before, cousins and uncles who were conscripted into armies and bonded as apprentices who were almost as lowly as slave girls. I bled and thought about the people to be killed. I bled and thought about the people to be born. During all my years on the mountain, I talked to no one except the two old people, but they seemed to be many people. The whole world lived inside the gourd, and the earth a green and blue pearl like the one the dragon plays with. When I could point at the sky and make a sword appear, a silver bolt in the sunlight, and control its slashing with my mind, the old people said I was ready to leave. The old man opened the gourd for the last time. I saw the Baron's messenger leave our house, and my father was saying, "This time I must go and fight." I would hurry down the mountain and take his place. The old people gave me 15 beads, which I was to use if I got into terrible danger. They gave me men's clothes and armor. We bowed to one another. The bird flew above me down the mountain, and for some miles, whenever I turned to look for them, there would be the two old people waving. I saw them through the mist. I saw them in the clouds. I saw them big on the mountain top when distance had shrunk them pines. They had probably left images of themselves for me to wave at and gone about their other business. When I reached the village, my father and mother had grown as old as the two whose shapes I could at last no longer see. I helped my parents carry their tools, and they walked ahead so straight, each carrying a basket or a hoe not to overburden me, their tears falling privately. My family surrounded me with so much love that I had almost forgotten the ones not there. I praised the new infants. Some of the people are saying that the 8 sages took you away to teach you magic, a little girl cousin said. They said they changed you into a bird and you flew to them. Some say you went to the city and became a prostitute, another cousin giggled. You might tell them that I met some teachers who were willing to teach me science, I said. I have been drafted, my father said. No, father, I said, I will take your place. My parents killed a chicken and steamed it whole, as if they were welcoming home a son, but I had gotten out of habit of meat. After eating rice and vegetables, I slept for a long time, preparation for the work ahead. In the morning, my parents woke me and asked that I come with them to the family hall. Stay in your night clothes, my mother said. Don't change yet. She was holding a basin, a towel, and a kettle of hot water. My father had a bottle of wine, an ink block and pens, and knives of various sizes. Come with us, he said. They had stopped the tears with which they had greeted me. Forebodingly, I caught a smell, metallic, the iron smell of blood, as when a woman gives birth, as at the sacrifice of a large animal, as when I menstruated and dreamed red dreams. My mother put a pillow on the floor before the ancestors. Kneel here, she said. Now take off your shirt. I kneeled with my back to my parents, so none of us would feel embarrassed. My mother washed my back as if I had left for only a day and were her baby yet. We are going to carve revenge on your back, my father said. We'll write out names and oaths. Wherever you are, whatever happens to you, people will know our sacrifice, my mother said, and you'll never forget either. She meant that even if I got killed, the people could use my dead body for a weapon, but we do not like to talk out loud about dying. My father first brushed the words in ink, and they fluttered down my back row by row. Then he began cutting. To make fine lines and points, he used thin blades. For the stems, he used large blades. My mother caught the blood and wiped the cuts with a cold towel soaked in wine. It hurt terribly, the cuts sharp, the air burning, the alcohol cold and hot, pain so various. I gripped my knees, I released them. Neither tension nor relaxation helped. I wanted to cry. If not for the 15 years of training, I would have writhed on the floor. I would have had to be held down. The list of grievances went on and on. If an enemy should flay me, the light would shine through my skin like lace. At the end of the last word, I fell forward. Together, my parents sang what they had written and let me rest. My mother fanned my back. We'll have you with us until your back heals, she said. When I could sit up again, my mother brought 2 mirrors, and I saw my back covered entirely with words in red and black files, like an army. like my army. My parents nursed me as if I had fallen in battle after many victories. Soon I was strong again. A white horse stepped into the courtyard where I was polishing my armor. Through the gates were locked tight, though through the moon door it came, a kingly white horse. It wore a saddle and bridle of red, gold, and black tassels dancing. The saddle was just my size of tigers and dragons tooled in swirls. The white horse pawed the ground for me to go. On the hooves of its near forefoot and hindfoot was the ideograph to fly. My parents and I had waited for such a sign. We took the fine saddlebags of the horse and filled them with salves and herbs, blue grass for washing my hair, extra sweaters, dried peaches. And he gave me a choice of ivory or silver chopsticks. I took the silver ones because they're lighter. It was like getting wedding presents. The cousins and the villagers came bearing bright orange jams, silk dresses, silver embroidery scissors. They brought blue and white porcelain bowls filled with water and carp. They were bowls painted with carp, fins like orange fire. I accepted all the gifts, the tables, the earthenware jugs, though I could not possibly carry them with me, and called for travel only a small copper cooking bowl. I could cook in it and eat out of it, and would not have to search for bowl-shaped rocks or tortoiseshells. I put on my men's clothes and armor, and tied my hair in a men's fashion. "How beautiful you look," the people said. "How beautiful she looks." A young man stepped out of the crowd. He looked familiar to me, as if he were the old man's son, or the old man himself when you looked at him from the corners of your eyes. "I want to go with you," he said. "You will be the first soldier in my army," I told him. I leapt into my horse's back and marveled at the power and height it gave to me. Just then, galloping out of nowhere, came a rider on a black horse. The villagers scattered except for my one soldier, who stood calmly in the road. I drew my sword. "Wait," shouted the rider, raising a weaponless hands. "Wait, I have traveled here to join you." Then the villagers relinquished their real gifts to me, their sons. Families who had hidden their boys during the last conscription volunteered them now. I took the ones their families could spare and the ones with hero fire in their eyes, not the young fathers and not those who would break hearts with their leaving. We were better equipped than many founders of dynasties had been when they walked north to the throne and emperor. They had been peasants like us. Millions of us had laid down our hoes on a dry ground and faced north. We sat in the fields from which a dragon had withdrawn its moisture and sharpened those hoes. Then, though it be 10,000 miles away, we walked to the palace. We would report to the emperor. The emperor who sat facing south must have been very frightened. Peasants walking day and night towards the capital, towards Peiping. But the last emperors of dynasties must not have been facing in the right direction, for they would have seen us and not let us get this hungry. We would not have to shout our grievances. The peasants would crown as emperor a farmer who knew the earth, a beggar who understood hunger. "Thank you, mother, thank you, father," I said before leaving. They had carved their names and addresses on me, and I would come back. Often I walked beside my horse to travel abreast of my army. When we had to impress other armies, marauders, columns of refugees, filing past one another, boy gangs following their martial arts teachers, I mounted and rode front. The soldiers who owned horses and weapons would pose fiercely on my left and right. The small bands joined us, but sometimes armies of equal or larger strength would fight us. Then, screaming a mighty scream and swinging two swords over my head, I charged the leaders. I released my bloodthirsty army and my straining war horse. I guided the horse with my knees, freeing both hands for sword work, spinning green and silver circles all around me. I inspired my army, and I fed them. At night, I sang to them glorious songs that came out of the sky into my head. When I opened my mouth, the songs poured out and were loud enough for the whole encampment to hear. My army stretched out for a mile. We sewed red flags and tied the red scraps around arms, legs, horses' tails. We wore our red clothes so that when we visited a village, we would look as happy as for New Year's Day. Then people would want to join the ranks. My army did not rape, only taking food when there was an abundance. We brought order wherever we went. When I won over a goodly number of fighters, I built up my army enough to attack fiefdoms and to pursue the enemies I had seen in the water Gourd. My first opponent turned out to be a giant, so much bigger than the toy general I used to peep at. During the charge, I singled out the leader, who grew as he ran towards me. Our eyes locked, and his height made me strain my neck looking up. my throat so vulnerable to the stroke of a knife that my eyes dropped to the secret death points on a huge body. First I cut off his leg with one sword swipe, as Chen Lufang had chopped the leg off of the thunder god. When the giant stumped towards me, I cut off his head. Instantly he reverted to his true self, a snake, and slithered away hissing. The fighting around me stopped as the combatants' eyes and mouths opened wide in amazement. That giant spell now broken, his soldiers, seeing that they had been led by a snake, pledged their loyalty to me. In the stillness after battle, I looked up at the mountain tops. Perhaps the old man and women were watching me and would enjoy my knowing it. They laughed to see a creature winking at them from the bottom of the water gourd. But on the green ledge above that battlefield, I saw the giants' wives crying. They had climbed out of their palanquins to watch their husband fight me, and now they were holding each other weeping. They were two sisters, two tiny fairies against the sky, widows from now on. Their long undersleeves, which they had pulled out to wipe their tears, flew whiteboarding in the mountain wind. After a time, they got back into their sedan chairs, and their servants carried them away. I led my army northward, rarely having to sidetrack. The emperor himself sent the enemies I was hunting chasing after me. Sometimes they attacked us on 2 or 3 sides. Sometimes they ambushed me when I rode ahead. We would always win, Kwang Kung, the god of war and literature, writing before me. I would be told of in fairy tales myself. I overheard some soldiers, and now there were many who had never met me, say that whenever we had been in danger of losing, I made a throwing gesture and the opposing army would fall, hurled across the battlefield. Hailstones as big as heads would shoot out of the sky, and lightning would stab like swords, but never a dose on my side. On his side, they said. I never told him the truth. Chinese executed women who disguised themselves as soldiers or students, no matter how bravely they fought or how high they scored on the examinations. One spring morning, I was at work in my tent repairing equipment, patching my clothes, and studying maps when a voice said, "General, may I visit you in your tent, please?" as if it were my own home. I did not allow strangers in my tent, and since I had no family with me, no one ever visited inside. Riverbanks, hillsides, and cool slope rooms under the pine trees, China provided her soldiers with meeting places enough. I opened the tent flap, and there in the sunlight stood my own husband with arms full of wildflowers for me. "You are beautiful," he said, and meant it truly. "I have looked for you everywhere. I have been looking for you since the day the bird flew away with you." We were so pleased with each other. The childhood friend found out at last, the childhood friend mysteriously grown up. "I followed you, but you skimmed over the rocks until I lost you." "I've looked for you too," I said, the tent now snug around us like a secret house when we were kids. "Whenever I heard about a good fighter, I went to see if it were you," I said. "I saw you marry me. I was so glad you married me." He wept when he took off my shirt and saw the scar words on my back. He loosened my hair and covered the words with it. I turned around and touched his face, loving the familiar first. So for a time I had a partner, my husband and I, soldiers together, just as when we were little soldiers playing in the village. We rode side by side into battle. When I became pregnant, during the last 4 months, I wore my armor altered so that I looked like a powerful big man. As a fat man, I walked with the foot soldiers so as not to joust the gestation. Now when I was naked, I was a strange human being indeed. Words carved on my back and a baby large in the front. I hid from the battle only once when I gave birth to our baby. In dark and silver dreams, I had seen him falling from the sky, each night closer to the earth, his soul a star. Just before labor began, the last star rays sank into my belly. My husband would talk to me and not go, though I said for him to return to the battlefield. He caught the baby, a boy, and put it on my breast. "What are we going to do with this?" he asked, holding up the piece of umbilical cord that had been closest to the baby. "Let's tie it to a flagpole until it dries," I said. We had both seen the boxes in which our parents kept the dry cords of all their children. "This one was yours and this one was yours," my mother would say to us brothers and sisters, and full of awe that she could remember. We made a sling for the baby inside my big armor and rode back to the thickest part of the fighting. The umbilical cord flew with the red flag and made us laugh. At night inside our own tent, I let the baby ride on my back. The sling was made of red satin and purple silk. The 4 paisley straps that tied across my breasts and around my waist ended in housewife pockets lined with a coin, a seed, and a juniper leaf. At the back of the sling, I had sewn a tiny quilted triangle, red at its center, against 2 shades of green. It marked the baby's nape for luck. I bowed, and the baby warmed himself against me, his breathing in rhythm with mine, his heart beating like my heart. When the baby was a month old, we gave a name and shaved his head. For the full month ceremony, my husband had found 2 eggs, which we dyed red by boiling them with a flag. I peeled one and rolled it all over the baby's head, his eyes, his lips, off his bump of his nose, his cheeks, his dear bald head, and a fontanelle. I had brought dried grapefruit peel in my saddlebag, and we also boiled that. We washed our heads and hands in the grapefruit water, dabbing it on the baby's forehead and hands. Then I gave my husband, the baby, and told him to take it to the family, and when I gave him all the money we had taken on the raise to take to my family. Go now, I said, before he is old enough to recognize me. While the blur is still in his eyes and the little fists shut tight like buds, I'll send my baby away from me. I altered my clothes and became again the slim young man, only now I would get so lonely with the tent so empty that I slept outside. My white horse overturned buckets and danced on them. It lifted full wine cups of its teeth. The strong soldiers lifted the horse in a wooden tub while it danced to the stone drums and flute music. I played with the soldiers, throwing arrows into a bronze jar. But I found none of these antics as amusing as when I first set out on the road. It was during this lonely time, when any high cry made the milk spill from my breasts, that I got careless. Wildflowers distracted me so that I followed them, picking one, then another, until I was alone in the woods. Out from behind trees, springing off branches, came the enemy, their leader looming like a genie out of the water gourd. I threw fists and feet at them, but there were so many, they pinned me to the ground, while their leader drew his sword. My fear shot forth, a quick jabbing sword that slashed fiercely, silver flashes, quick cuts wherever my attention drove it. The leader stared at the palpable sword, swishing unclutched at his men, then laughed aloud. As if signaled by his laughter, 2 more swords appeared in midair. They clanged against mine, and I felt metal vibrate inside my brain. I willed my sword to hit back and to go after the brain that controlled the other swords. But the man fought well, hurting my brain. The swords opened and closed, scissoring madly, metal zinging along metal. Unable to leave my sky sword to work itself, I would be watching the swords move like a puppet when a genie yanked my hair back and held the dagger against my throat. Aha, he said, what have we here? He lifted the bead pouch out of my shirt and cut the string. I grabbed his arm, and one of his swords dived towards me, and I rolled out of the way. A horse galloped up, and he leapt on it, escaping into the forest, the beads in his fists. His swords fought again behind him until I heard him shout, I am here, and they flew to his side. So I had done battle with the prince, who had mixed the blood of 2 sons with the metal he had used for casting his swords. I ran back to my soldiers and gathered the fastest horsemen for pursuit. Our horses ran like the little white water horses on the surf. Across the plain, we could see the enemy, a dust devil, rushing towards the horizon. Wanting to see, I focused my eyes as the eagles taught me, and there the genie would be, shaking one bead out of the pouch and casting it at us. Nothing would happen. No thunder, no earthquake that split open the ground, no hailstones big as heads. Stop, I ordered my riders. Our horses are exhausted, and I don't want to chase any farther south. The rest of the victories will be won on my own, slow and without shortcuts. I stood on the top of the last hill before Peiping and saw the roads below me flowing like living rivers. Between roads and the woods and the plains moved too, the land was peopled, the Han people, the people of 100 surnames, marching with one heart, our tatters flying. The death and joy were exactly known to me, the Chinese population. After much hardship, a few of our millions had arrived together at the capital. We faced the emperor personally. We beheaded him, cleaned out the palace, and inaugurated the peasant who would begin a new order. In his rags, he sat on the throne facing south, and we, a great red crowd, bowed to him 3 times. He commended some of us who were his first generals. I told the people who had come with me that they were free to go now, but since the long wall was so close, I would go see it. They could come along if they liked. So loath to disband after such high adventures, we reached the northern boundary of the world, chasing Mongols en route. I touched the long wall with my own fingers, running the edge of the hand between the stones, tracing the grooves the builder's hands had made. We laid our foreheads and our cheeks against the long wall, and cried like the women who had come here looking for their men so long building the wall. In my travels north, I had not found my brother. Carrying the news about the new emperor, I went home, where one more battle awaited me. The baron who had drafted my brother would still be bearing sway over our village. Having dropped my soldiers off at the crossroads and bridges, I attacked the Baron's stronghold alone. I jumped over the double walls and landed with the swords drawn and knees bent, ready to spring. When no one accosted me, I sheathed the swords and walked about like a guest until I found the Baron. He was counting his money, his fat ringed fingers playing over the abacus. "Who are you? What do you want?" he said, encircling his profits of his arms. He sat square and fat like a god. "I want your life in payment for your crimes against the villagers." "I haven't done anything to you. All this is mine. I earned it. I didn't steal it from you. I've never seen you about before in my life. Who are you?" "I am a female avenger." Then, heaven help him, he tried to be charming, to appeal to me a man to man. "Oh, come now, everyone takes the girls when he can. The families are glad to be rid of them. Girls are maggots in the rice. It is more profitable to raise geese than daughters." He quoted to me the sayings I hated. "Regret what you've done before I kill you," I said. I haven't done anything other men even you wouldn't have done in my place. You took my brother. I freed my apprentices. He was not an apprentice. China needs soldiers in wartime. You took away my childhood." "I don't know what you're talking about. We've never met before. I've done nothing to you." "You've done this," I said, and ripped off my shirt to show him my back. "You are responsible for this." When I saw his startled eyes at my breasts, I slashed him across the face, and on the second stroke, cut off his head. I pulled my shirt back on and opened the house to the villagers. The Baron's family and servants hid in the closets and under the beds. The villagers dragged them out into the courtyard where they tried them next to the beheading machine. "Did you take my harvest so that my children had to eat grass?" a weeping farmer said. "I saw him steal seed grain," another testified. "My family was hiding under a thatch on the roof when the bandits robbed their house, and we saw this one take off his mask. They spared those who proved they could be reformed. They beheaded the others. Their necks were collared in the beheading machine, which slowly clamped shut. There was one last-minute reprieve of a bodyguard when a witness shouted testimony just as the vice was pinching blood. The guard had been recently joined the houseboat in exchange for a child hostage. A slow killing gives a criminal time to regret his crimes and think of the right words to prove he can change. I searched the house, hunting out people for trial. I came upon a locked room. When I broke down the door, I found women cowering, whimpering women. I heard shrill insect noises and scurrying. They blinked weakly at me like peasants that have been raised in the dark for soft meat. The servants who walked the ladies had abandoned them, and they could not escape on their little bound feet. Some crawled away from me, using their elbows to pull themselves along. These women would not be good for anything. I called the villages to come identify any daughters they wanted to take home, but no one claimed any. I gave each woman a bag full of rice, which they sat on. They rolled the bags to the road. They wandered away like ghosts. Later, it would be said, they turned into the band of swordswomen who are a mercenary army. They did not wear men's clothes like me, but rode as women in black and red dresses. They brought up baby girls, so that many poor families welcomed their visitations. When slave girls and daughters-in-law ran away, people would say they joined these witch Amazons. They killed men and boys. I myself never encountered such women and could not vouch for their reality. After the trials, we tore out the ancestral tablets. "We'll use this great hall for village meetings," I announced. "Here we'll put on operas. We'll sing together and talk story." We washed the courtyard. We exercised the house of smoke and red pepper. "This is a new year," I told the people. Then year one. I went home to my parents-in-law and husband and son. My son stared, very impressed by the general he had seen in the parade, but his father said, "It's your mother. Go to your mother." My son was delighted that the shining general was his mother too. She gave him her helmet to wear and her swords to hold. Wearing my black embroidered wedding coat, I knelt at my parents-in-law feet as I would have done as a bride. "Now my public duties are finished," I said. "I will stay with you, doing farm work and housework, and earning and giving you more sons." "Go visit your mother and father first," my mother-in-law said. "A generous woman. They want to welcome you." My mother and father and the entire clan will be living happily on the money I sent them. My parents had bought them coffins. They would sacrifice a pig to the gods that I had returned. From the words on my back and how they were fulfilled, the villagers would make a legend about my perfect fidelity. My American life is such a disappointment. I got straight A's, Mama. Let me tell you a true story about a girl who saved her village. I could not figure out what was my village, and it was important that I could do something big and fine, or else my parents would sell me when we made our way back to China. In China, there were solutions for what to do with little girls who ate up food and threw tantrums. You can't eat straight A's. When one of my parents or the immigrant villagers said, "Feeding girls is feeding cowbirds," I would thrash on the floor and scream so hard that I couldn't talk. I couldn't stop. "What's the matter with her?" "I don't know. Bad, I guess. You know how girls are. There's no profit in raising girls. Better to raise geese than girls." I would hit her if she was mine. There's no use wasting all that discipline on a girl. When you raise girls, you're raising children for strangers. "Stop her crying," my mother would yell. "I'm going to hit you if you don't stop. Bad girl, stop." I'm going to remember never to hit or scold my children for crying, I thought, because then they will only cry more. "I'm not a bad girl," I would scream. "Not a bad girl, I'm not a bad girl." I might as well have said, "I'm not a girl." "When you were little, all you had to say was, 'I'm not a bad girl,' and you would make yourself cry," my mother said, talking a story about my childhood. I minded the immigrant villagers shook their heads at my sister and me. One girl and another girl, they said, and my parents ashamed to take us out together. The good part about my brothers being born was that people stopped saying, "all girls," but I learned new grievances. "Did you roll an egg on your face like that when I was born? Did you have a full month party for me? Did you turn on all the lights? Did you send my picture to grandmother? Why not? Because I'm a girl? Is that why not? Why did you teach me English? You liked to have me beaten up at school, didn't you?" "She is very mean, isn't she?" the immigrant villagers would say. "Come, children, hurry, hurry. Who wants to go with great uncle?" On Saturday mornings, my great uncle, the ex-river pirate, did the shopping. "Get your coats, whoever's coming." I'm coming, wait for me." When he heard girls' voices, he turned on us and roared, "No girls," and left my sisters and me hanging our coats back up, not looking at one another. The boys came back with candy and new toys. When they walked through Chinatown, the people must have said, "A boy, and another boy." At my great uncle's funeral, I secretly tested out feeling that he was dead, the 6-foot bearish masculinity of him.